and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton Kawartha Lakes, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. You can tell your friends to download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. On today's show, we're talking about Mark Carney's first budget, $80 billion in the hole. Also, what you can do with high grocery prices, how you can fight back. Well, the CBC has a few ideas on what to do. We'll get to that and so much more. We bring on Philip Lawrence, the Member of Parliament for Northumberland. Clark, thanks for coming on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Jim.
I always appreciate how you look into the numbers, how you figure out the path forward, and what kind of shape we're in. So I know the budget was a few weeks ago. People are going through it. They're getting an idea of how it impacts them, if at all.
Right.
The big number that we're seeing is $80 billion in the hole.
It's $80 billion deficit, and that can be hard for people to visualize and understand. Not many people see $80 billion, unless, of course, you work for Brookfield, but not many people can visualize $80 billion. And so I actually just looked up a little bit what $80 billion could get you.
Perfect.
Okay? So you could, of course, build 80 brand new state-of-the-art hospitals across the country. If, in fact, you took $100 bills and you stacked them one on top of each other, you could all go all the way to lower orbit. So that gives you an idea of how massive the $80 billion is. You could buy hundreds of Jeff Bezos' yachts and many, many more. But in all seriousness, like the $80 billion is an absolutely massive deficit, the largest deficit in Canadian history aside from the COVID era, which is obviously a different era. But $80 billion is just a tremendous amount of money that is going to be pulled out of Canadians' pockets. And that, to me, is the most important things, right? Like this $80 billion does just not come from the sky. That will come from Canadians, and Canadians, quite frankly, not born yet. This truly is a generational debt budget.
And it causes inflation, right? It not only causes inflation, but it also takes money that could be invested in companies and new ideas, and people are then buying government debt. You know, it just takes working capital out of the marketplace, which slows the growth of the economy, which we all want to get sparked.
You're absolutely right, Jamie. So there are only so many dollars in the economy. It really is finite to a certain extent. And any government, any society has the decision to make how many of those dollars goes into public and how many of those dollars stay in the private sphere. The public sphere, like the government does lots of important and great things, right? Like healthcare, like our police, like our firefighters, very important things. And quite frankly, it has a role in equity as well, making sure that the wealth is distributed. But it's gotten to such a point where you're now suffocating out, you're crowding out private sector growth, which is a double-edged sword because on one hand, of course, it brings down the amount of our wages, it increases inflation, which reduces your ability to purchase things, and finally, it actually will undermine our social safety network, our social safety net, our public sector, because where the wealth is generated is within the private sector, within our economy. And so when you crowd that out, when there's just simply not enough capital to go around to our businesses, to our job creators, to our wealth creators, what happens is that economy starts to shrink. And quite frankly, we've seen that over the Trudeau era, which it's just more of the same because underneath Trudeau, they promised the more we spend, the more we invest, the more the economy will grow, and that will get rid of the budget. That's the genesis of the budget will balance itself line. But the reality is that no government has ever been able to tax itself into prosperity. Government spending very rarely ever creates actual economic growth. That's why when you see socialist countries like Venezuela, like the USSR, you do not see strong growing economies. Actually, you see declining economies. So the more money that we take out of the private sector, the slower economic growth. And you can call it whatever you want. In fact, in a question in QP a couple weeks ago, I called it, you could call it the fluffy kitten fund. No matter how glowingly you talk about this government spending, at the end of the day, you are taking money out of the productivity sphere, the economic growth sphere, and the more we reduce that, the less growth we have, the less income we have for our social safety network, and the more inflation we have as well.
You always have to remember where the money comes from, and I think the government seems to forget this. And at the same time, nobody flees a free country into a socialist country. It's always the other way around, but yet this government's proposing and pushing policies that really cripple our ability to attract investment and grow. We are almost dead last in the developed world to do this. And when the spark of creation, the spark of innovation, it comes from productive people. The government is not the spark of innovation. If you want an example, have the government take over the movie industry or the music industry or the beer industry, right? Where we have tons of selection for everyone and everyone. The government would not manage it that way. You'd get one choice only, and that's what the government wants, and that's what you get, whether you like it, want it, or need it. You will have that.
Yeah, and you know what? As many times socialism has been tried as many times it's failed. I actually had
just not having the right socialism. It wasn't the right kind.
Yes,
it will be better next time. Promise.
I actually had this discussion with someone the other day, and we discussed the fact that the modern incarnation of the actual reality, the realization of socialism, is what has occurred in Venezuela, is what has happened in Cuba, it is what happened to USSR. And just to put a final point on is the fact that, you know, when the Berlin Wall came down, it wasn't people from the West fleeing into to East Germany. It was quite the opposite, right? And so we need that economic growth to continue. And the way that we do that is to give people the resources they need. Whether you're from Kawartha or from Coburg, I believe in you. I believe in individual Canadians and their ability to create, their ability to manage resources, their ability to create jobs that will ultimately power our economy much more than I will believe in any central planner. History repeats itself over and over again.
But it's kind of weird. We have and we'll get back on topic in a second. We have all these people from Venezuela fleeing that country, fleeing it, eating their pets and otherwise, right? Like, this is concerning, but none of the people preaching those type of policies that push kind of Venezuela type government or economy are moving to Venezuela. Why is that?
Yeah,
there's a reason for this.
The evidence is clear, right? Like Winston Churchill described it as a country trying to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and yanking on the handle, right? Like it's complete silliness, right? So.
Yeah. So the parliamentary budget officer over the last few days came up with a few there's what we're talking about, slamming the Mark Carney, the Liberal government for their budget. And let's cue up cut one. And then, the parliamentary budget officer brings up some good points, talks about where the budget's failing. And then something amazing happened as well with the parliamentary budget officer. Now, he's only interim, but we'll get to that in a second. Play cut one.
From our perspective, we think that the definition the government's used around capital investments is overly expansive. And in particular, they've thrown some things in there, some categories of spending, which other jurisdictions in other countries would not typically include. Most notably, the inspiration, of course, for this framework comes from the United Kingdom. And in the case of the UK, it's a far narrower definition. And of course, the biggest risk with all of this is if you're not spending on productive capital investments, if you have an overly broad definition, then you're not going to get the investment impact and the growth in the economy that the government expects.
So Mark Carney, in large part, printed a lot of money when he was the governor of the Bank of England, right?
Yes.
He printed a lot of money, created a lot of problems as well. And we're getting these warnings from the parliamentary budget officer, who is interim. And then the government says, let's get the next graphic here. We're going to replace that budget officer.
So let's just take a half a step back so that folks can understand what Mark Carney, the Prime Minister Carney, attempted to do. So what he was doing is he said, we're going to divide the budget between operational and capital. They are set definitions for what operation and capital is. His idea was that I can say that I'm going to spend less and invest more. The reality is spending is spending, but that's what he was attempting to do. But what he saw was that there was so much spending on the operations that he couldn't do it honestly. And so what the PBO is saying is that he actually moves things from the operational ledger to the capital ledger in order to make the books look better. So basically, not only did he cook the books, he overcooked the books. And so what we're left with now is a false stating of the spending by putting operational dollars and the capital dollars so that he can have a quote-unquote win of balancing the operational budget, which he still won't do. But the whole game, it was just a shell game meant to trick Canadians that he was actually fiscally responsible, when the reality is they spent $78 billion. Then, as they said, so the PBO comes out and, as is his job and his duty, to come out and say, well, actually, we've got some difficulty. He used in an earlier committee testimony, stupefying, stunning, the amount of
unsustainable.
Unsustainable. And he said that you are not correctly allocating the spending between spending and capital. And the government's response is to put out a advertisement to replace him. And the crazy was the terminology they used in there. Like they used terms like diplomatic and tact. No, that's not what I want on my PBO, Jamie. I want you to be direct and truthful. And quite frankly, this PBO has been exactly that. They're telling the truth to Canadians. He's telling the truth to Canadians, and good on him for doing it.
Now, it should be also noted, the Parliamentary Budget Officer reports to Parliament as a whole, right? The government has their bureaucrats and department and officials that do their thing. This individual is meant to shine some light for parliamentarians of all stripes so that we are able to better do our jobs. And one of the most important functions that we have is to hold the government to account, but also look over the country's finances. Right. This individual helps us do that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that there are tens and hundreds of different departments. The financial statements for the government are tens, if not hundreds of pages. And just the budget alone is hundreds of pages. So being able to parse that information and get a full understanding of it is extremely difficult. And that's why we need a professional like the PBO. And it's his job to go through and with his extensive training in accounting, et cetera, to be able to pull out the important bits of information that parliamentarians and, more importantly, Canadians can see. And for someone in his role to come out and use the words like stupefying, stunning, or to call out the government for misallocating the spending or mislabeling the spending is something. Right? This is just not something that he would take lightly, and I think he said that as much. This is very serious. This is a very important issue, and quite frankly, we all need to pay attention.
That goes to the overall point that we were having earlier is about affordability. Canadians are having trouble to get by. So we look at some of the things that meat's up 8.4%. This is year over year inflation increases. Beef, frozen or fresh, 16.8%, it's up. Ham and bacon up 7.4%. Talking about the provinces and how they're not doing so well compared to other states. The fruit juice is 7.3% up. Oranges, 7.2%. The list is incredible. Yeah. And anyone who is on a single income, fixed income, even just normal working people are struggling to get by. But the CBC has a fantastic idea for those struggling. Play cut 2.
Kind of grocery store in Quebec is promising big savings at a time when food prices keep rising. The low-cost chain sells discounted items, sometimes past their best before date. As the CBC's Gabriel Gindy found out, shoppers say the deals are hard to beat.
I'm at a type of grocery store that's gaining a lot of momentum. It sells discounted items, and people shopping here say they're saving a lot of money. The food is sourced through distributors and manufacturers, so products that are mislabeled or can't be sold in regular grocery stores end up here, like this beef that was supposed to go to a restaurant. It's sold at a discount, making prices more affordable. Another reason for why prices are so cheap is because they sell items that are near or past their best before date.
How out of touch do you have to be?
Holy mackerel, right? Like the message here is clear, or what we should take from this. The fact that the government is spending billions and billions of dollars. They need to mind their budget so Canadians can stay in their budget. It is not acceptable in Canada for our solution to be, instead of the government restraining expenditure, you go out and get rotten food, right? Like that's mayonnaise. Yeah. You're selling rotten mayonnaise? That's our solution, CBC? Good grief. And now the CBC is going to get well over $1 billion to tell Canadians to go out there and buy rotten food. That is the solution. It really is absolutely mind-blowing. The interest on this debt, the deficit will be over $5,400 per Canadian. That would buy a lot of fresh food and groceries. So let's return that to Canadians and instead of telling them to go down to their local discount rotten food retailer and purchase it there.
Yeah, wouldn't it be so much easier if people had their spending power back? Yeah. Wouldn't it be so much easier if there was a decrease in the cost of food? But instead, we keep devaluing our currency. Yeah. We keep increasing our debt. Taxes on farmers, that's still there. The industrial carbon tax, it's still there. About the same amount that was taken off by the consumer side. No rebate, because that was gone. The amount of spending is causing this pain. And I can't hammer this home enough, because you need to understand how we got here in order to take the path forward. Because if you forget how we got here, you might just say, oh, we need to spend more or invest more, do something. No, that's how we got here. That's the problem.
I mean, you're exactly right. And if you want historical proof, it even goes back before Justin Trudeau, right, to his father. If you guys go, I've got some homework for your audience here. Especially if you're in your iPad right now or watching this, go and Google the U.S. dollar compared to the Canadian dollar, and then overlay that with who was in power. You will see an incredible correlation between when Conservatives are in power and a strong Canadian dollar, and when Liberals are in power and a weak Canadian dollar. And that all has to do with excessive spending. So underneath the Mulroney era, the Canadian dollar is strong. Underneath Harper, we almost hit parity. In fact, we did. You're absolutely right. And now we're back down to around 71 cents and falling.
Well, even when we did hit parity, remember the CBC having a freak out about that?
Yes.
How bad that was? They found every negative they could.
Yeah.
Finally, a powerful economy with a dollar that was on par. And the CBC, I remember them, what did they say? Thomas Mulcair called it the Dutch disease or something like that. They just found the negative.
Yeah, the reality is a strong dollar backed by a strong Canadian government that knows how to spend within its means that the purchasing power of Canadians gets stronger and stronger. And in addition to the Canadian dollar getting weak, which in itself helps or hurts the inflation numbers, increasing inflation higher and higher, that expenditure also crowds out investment dollars, meaning that those dollars which are printed create more and more inflation. And so you get this just nasty death cycle of an economy where you end up getting a weaker and weaker dollar that feeds on itself, which is greater inflation. We need to have a turn away from central planning, a turn away from excessive expenditure, and back to empowering Canadians, because it's Canadians that made this country the best place on earth, and it'll be the Canadian people that return us back to where we need to be.
Well, hopefully we have some gold reserves. Oh, wait. No, we don't. We sold those. Anyway, we're pretty much out of time. As you know, the guests get the last word. Philip, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And I would just tell Canadians that it is a very serious time in Canada. These $78 billion or $5,000 per Canadian that this government is overspending is hurting all Canadians. We're in the worst economic times since the Great Depression. We've literally had about zero economic growth since Prime Minister Trudeau was elected. We need to turn this around. It's time for a Pierre Poilievre government. It's time for a change.
Well done. Philip Lawrence, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for yours, Member of Parliament for Northumberland Clark. Appreciate you liking, sharing, making a comment or two, and telling your friends to download it as well, because in order to get the message out, we need your help. Please do that, and we will have new content for you, as mentioned off the top, every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.